millions of youth on the African continent who were looking for a better world in terms of the environment. But then they also want Africa to develop and prosper. So how do we balance this? Because the continent is populated mostly by folks who are far younger than I am.
Sorry, what was the last part of it? You said the continent is populated by what?
Mostly by youths, young people.
So,
and these guys want to see development on the continent. They want to see prosperity. And they want to live in a world that is much better and healthier in terms of climate issues.
I mean, I think so if you want the world to be a better place to live in terms of having more of an opportunity to have a long life, a healthy life, a safe life, also a life with more opportunity, more, higher environmental quality, better ability to enjoy nature, everything that I think human beings care about, energy is fundamental to all of those things. Because the lower cost energy is, the lower cost it is to use machines. And machines are what make us productive and prosperous. Without machines, the world is very inhospitable to humans. It's a more natural place, and it's a worse place. The more we use machines, the more we live in an abundant and safe world. I think, though, so energy, the more energy you use, and people have this idea that, well, energy is good, but then it hurts the environment. But if you think about environment in a human sense, energy helps our environment. For example, I mentioned energy keeps us safe from climate disasters. So here's a question. Are we better off climate-wise today than we were 100 years ago? Does anyone here want to live in the climate 100 years ago with that technology? Raise your hand. Okay, so if you care about climate from a human perspective, then there's no trade-off. Fossil fuels have been good because the climate-related benefits are so much more significant. Or take clean water, for example. How do we get clean water? Nature doesn't just give us Evian and Perrier all over the place, right? It gives us clean water. Doesn't exist all that many places. Water is naturally dirty, so we need to purify it using energy. And it's naturally distant, so we need to pump it using energy. So I think there's this false idea of, oh, we care about energy, but we care about, quote, the environment. We have to balance them. It's really, if you want a better life, you want more energy. Now, you want to minimize unnecessary pollution from it. But I don't think Africa should be concerned about CO2 right now. It should just not be a priority. One thing is it's totally not within your control. The only way to actually reduce CO2 is long-term, if you want to do it humanely, is long-term, and doing it with innovation. So innovating in nuclear, innovating in geothermal, et cetera. That's not what is going to happen in Africa in the near future. Once Africa becomes really prosperous, that's great. Then Africa can lead in the development of new technologies. The wealthier world is going to lead in the development of new technologies, but Africa should only be using the technologies that are cost-effective now and for the foreseeable future. I'm sorry, everyone involved in green hydrogen, but Africa should not be focused on green hydrogen, which is totally unproven. It should be focused on using things, including coal, by the way. Like, coal is the best way for most countries to get electricity. The poorest countries get electricity. So if the youth are concerned about, like, if you're weighing it all, let's reduce CO2 emissions with let's get energy, stop that. That's a bad, you don't want to be balancing that at all. Just focus on the energy.
Interesting. One of the forms of energy being talked about to help Africa's poor communities in far-flung villages and towns across the continent was to use solar energy and what have you, off-grid access form of energy. And do you think we'll be able to get this to the people at the speed at which you can use oil and gas to catalyze their access to energy at a very low cost level?
I mean, the uses of solar, so solar has certain uses that are valid, and it may have more going forward, but it has the basic unreliability problem. So a lot of the cases I see where people talk about solar is they're talking about very, very small scale use. Like, oh, let's power some lights, let's power a radio. And I just, if that's just an intermediate thing to help people a little bit, if you view it that way, that's fine. But it's too often viewed as this is a solution. And again, I think that has a racist component to it, because if no one in the US would think it's okay for me to just have enough energy to power some lights and a flashlight or something like that and a radio. We need real energy. And so these tiny little solar things are not going to do it. What you need is more industrialization, more cities. You need real energy. And I'm not an expert in how to do every aspect of development, but we do need to learn from all the success stories. We've had country after country go from poverty to prosperity by using fossil fuels and by having better political institutions. And I think that's the thing to learn from.
Interesting when you look at the amount of oil under the ground, close to 130 billion barrels of oil still under the ground. You've got so much trillion cubits of gas that haven't been harvested by Africa. So the question is, what are the implications if all of these are left untouched under the ground and we just move on?
I mean, it's so insane that this is on the table to leave it underground. But when the implications are, you just deprive yourself of a huge amount of potential prosperity, right? I mean, these are oil and natural gas are two of the most valuable things in the world. Everyone is desperate for them, particularly right now. We've had shortages of both. All things being equal, it's really good to produce them domestically if you can. One is it's a major revenue source. Two, if you can add things like refining capacity domestically, it can be a major energy source domestically. So that's exciting as well. So I think it's just obviously a huge opportunity that you don't want to let go. But I would go broader than that, because the real opportunity is the opportunity to use fossil fuels to prosper. As I said before, even if you don't have fossil fuels domestically, you still need it to power modern grids. If you look at how so many countries have been successful, is they've had a business-friendly environment, and they've welcomed affordable energy, and so then people build factories, for example, and they make the labor much more productive, and the place gets a lot more productive. We've seen this in country after country after country. So you need that business-friendly environment, and you need the freedom to use fossil fuels. It doesn't really matter if Singapore doesn't have any domestic fossil fuels, because they can just import them as long as they have a business-friendly environment and the freedom to use fossil fuels, they can prosper. So whether it's, yes, of course, the nations that have abundant resources should use them, but everyone should be using fossil fuels to industrialize.
So we're just heading to COP28, and what would be your key message for COP28? What do you think Africa's narrative should be at COP28?
My key message for COP28 is withdraw from the Paris Agreement. That sounds out there, but why would you ever sign this agreement? I mean, I know some of the reasons why, but the reasons why usually aren't good. This is an agreement that in its current interpretation says you have to rapidly eliminate fossil fuel use in the next 27 years. Like, this is just a death sentence. China's not following it. They have 300 coal plants in the pipeline designed to last 40-plus years. India's not following it, but they're trying to get Africa to follow it. And if it even slows down your progress 50%, that is ruining hundreds of millions of lives. So this is the thing. I think, and if anyone knows any leaders who are open to talking about this, if there were 3 African governments that said, we withdraw from the Paris Agreement, you would save the world. You would save the world from the destruction of this maniacal movement, because you would break the monopoly that they have. So I don't know if it's possible to get anyone to do this. Again, I'm happy to talk to anyone. Email me, alex@alexepstein.com. I'll help you in any way I can. But I'm just telling you morally what's right. I'm just asking for 3. I would love it if all the African leaders did. But this is just a death sentence for the globe. It makes no sense at all. And why do it? Why do it? Because what? Because they're going to let you use a little fossil fuels? Well, that's not enough. Because does anyone believe you're going to get $100 billion a year indefinitely? Particularly if, first of all, that was promised, it didn't happen. And the world is going to make itself poorer and poorer. We're having a global economic crisis based on a global energy crisis that's based on just a tiny implementation of net zero. We haven't even reduced fossil fuel use under net zero. We've just slowed the growth. We caused a global energy crisis. We have all sorts of inflation problems. Do you really think that when wealthy nations are having huge economic problems, they're going to just dump $100 billion a year? It's definitely not going to happen. And by the way, to say another controversial thing, I don't think it's justified. I don't think that climate reparations are a thing. I think what the West should apologize for is anything it does to slow progress in the rest of the world. Like our anti-GMO stuff, that's shameful. Our anti-fossil fuel stuff is shameful. Our anti-hydro stuff is shameful. But our fossil fuel use has been good for the world. Our fossil fuel use has raised the life expectancy of everyone. We've decreased the climate-related death for everyone. So I don't believe in climate relations morally, and they're sure as hell not happening practically. So there's nothing to lose and everything to gain in standing up to this movement and withdrawing from this Paris Agreement. And if you get threatened behind the scenes, again, expose them.
I'm trying to wrap this up as a business journalist, and I sat in this room yesterday evening for a couple of hours with the African Petroleum Producers Organization's chief executive, the Secretary General, and the APPU is moving towards a few initiatives to support and further push for Africa's energy sovereignty. For example, the setup of the African Energy Bank, as well as getting Africa's heads of state and governments to sit together and provide the political leadership and support that the private sector and Africa's energy organizations and public institutions will need. What more do you think the continent can do to ramp up on the road to energy sovereignty, while energy transition, which you call energy expansion, should go hand in hand?
Well, there's a lot more that can be done. So there's what can be done domestically, and then what can be done internationally. I think domestically, and this is not something I know as much about, but I know enough in broad strokes, is that you want as much political reform as possible to make African nations business-friendly places to be. That is very important to do. So I'm a big fan. If you don't know of her, check her out, Magat Wade, a Senegalese entrepreneur. She has a new book coming out, The Heart of a Cheetah, which I've just started reading. We're very much on the same team in terms of more free markets, more capitalism. I know NJ is in this camp as well. I think that is important. Very, very important. So if you want to know what more can you do, it's not just about developing the resources, it's about changing the government for the better so that more people want to invest here, more people want to work here, et cetera. So there's that element of it. And internationally, which is the thing I know more about, is having a different posture. Instead of just saying, hey, we want a just transition, let us do this, but we promise you other things, proudly say, no, we are open for business. We want to be great producers. We're investing in this. We're doubling down in this. If you do that, you will find people who will be drawn to you. Nobody is inspired by the idea of, hey, we're going to do a little bit of fossil fuels. But if you say we're committed to our development, our prosperity, we embrace fossil fuels, I know of lots of billionaires around the world who would love that. I know of lots of pro-freedom politicians in the U.S. who would love that. They're not noticing you right now because the messaging is so weak. I know it's stronger than it used to be, and congratulations for that, but it should be 10 times stronger. Like a proud, confident Africa will attract investment, will attract support from pro-freedom politicians, and it will attract respect.